On this show, we've criticised Rishi Sunak's spring statement for not offering enough help for those struggling with the cost of living crisis. The most viral clip from BBC Question Time this week had an audience member attack the government from a different angle.
I can't tell you how disappointed I am with your government. I really can't express in words the mess you've made. I sat through the pandemic and I watched money being hemorrhaged away, money that we could well do with now. I think you're out of touch. You're dealing in millions and millions and trillions of pounds. You know the cost of everything and the value of nothing. We're up to there in debt, wishing we were taller. I don't know what to say to you other than just a lot of you just go. Just go. And this is from someone that voted for you. What a disappointment you are. Sorry.
That clip's now been viewed around 1 million times on Twitter, that is. And I have to say, when I watched that clip, I was in two minds. I do like to see a Tory getting taken down in public, especially when you get that huge round of applause afterwards. At the same time, that critique, which seemed to be very popular in the room, comes from a regressive place, I think. You know, she's essentially saying, you're spending too much. You need to tighten your purse strings. Aaron, was that a demand for austerity that was getting a round of applause?
Yeah, and there's so many sort of blue tick libs who are going to be like, oh, like clapping like seals. Isn't this great? They're attacking the Tories. This is awful. She's saying things which are categorically untrue. She's saying we could do with that money now. We have the money now. Public debt's still only around, I think, 90% of GDP. We have the money. And the idea that, the crisis we're going through now in some way is bad for national debt. High inflation is bad on many counts. High inflation is terrible on many counts. One thing it's really good for is the fact that it winds down the real value of liabilities and debts, because that's what inflation is. So the idea that high inflation, oh my God, we really have to worry about the national debt. Well, no, because it's actually falling in relative value. Austerity started like 12 years ago. I have to say, it was pushed, not principally by the Tories, but by the media. And it has warped people's understanding of how macroeconomics works. Now, look, it's always very difficult to understand, but actually it turns out that the presumption that, look, the state is quite a powerful thing, it can do things that the rest of us can't, is correct. The Bank of England is not like a credit card, okay? So we could spend more money during COVID. That doesn't mean that we can't do certain counter-cyclical measures, as they're called, right now too. And like I say, in fact, when borrowing costs are so low and inflation is so high, it's Goldilocks for your debt, because you can spend money using government debt. The repayment rates are relatively low. The interest rates are relatively low. And it's getting cheaper anyway because of inflation. So economically illiterate. But I think so many people, like I say, particularly blue tick libs, Michael, are so desperate to own the Tories, they're willing to buy into the most reactionary right-wing, market fundamentalist political economy imaginable. I think that's a bit of a worry. So the woman, she was a fool for voting Tory in 2019, and she's still a fool. Sorry.
Oh, you're not supposed to tell the voters that, Aaron. I suppose you're not a politician, so it doesn't really matter. As I said, I do think what was said in that clip was incredibly reactionary. The more positive way of looking at it, if you want the Tories out of government, is if you think about, people's attitude to the economy as kind of just vibes. So the vibe now is that the Tories are less good at the economy than the vibe about the Tories was, say, a year ago. And we have some evidence that this is sort of how people are thinking about this. So Labour are now more trusted to handle the economy than the Conservatives. So a poll from Opinion following the spring statement found that 32% of the public would trust Keir Starmer and Rachel Reeves most to handle the economy, with only 31% saying Boris Johnson and Rishi Sunak. And that's a pretty dramatic reversal from last year, when 39% said they'd trust the Tories and only 25% said Labour. We can also show you a more detailed breakdown here. So when it comes to bringing down the national debt, that's the only metric on which people are still most confident that Conservatives would be able to do it. Running the economy, a much more sort of general, abstract thing. running the economy. People trust Labour to do that, 34 to 32 for spending government money efficiently. Labour are in the lead, 36 to 26%. In improving public services and improving your financial situation, Labour are well ahead. Aaron, Labour are going to be pretty pleased with that, aren't they? Starmer and Rachel Reeves. Well, it's actually quite rare for Labour to be ahead on the general economics metric.
Yeah, so I was very critical of that woman just now. And I should say, so in terms of an electoral calculus for Labour, it's still obviously excellent that somebody is saying, I'm a Tory voter and I think you should now go. And I think you're a disgrace. And it's obviously positive in terms of political expediency for the Labour Party. My worry is, Michael, look, we have multiple problems as a society, which we're presently facing, which are coming down the line. Mass inequality, housing crisis. We're now looking by 2025 at wages being flat for 17, 18 years. I left university and I have entered a world which literally, short of a war, couldn't have gone more wrong. Really couldn't have gone more wrong. If you entered the labour market, say in 2006-07, things have not turned out like you thought. If we want to get over, like I say, inequality, stagnant wages, stagnant productivity, then deal with climate change, then demographic aging, then regional inequality, then national infrastructure. You want to do all of this stuff, right? The very premise of that question, will you be good on the economy, is not the way to look at this. Now, I understand Labour have to want to be good at the economy. I get that. And that's the nature of the beast. I understand that entirely. But if we're going to be stuck in this political rut where you say, well, you're running more than a 3% deficit this year, that's terrible, that's bad politics, you're bad on the economy. Well, look, we've had stagnant wages for 15 years, according to the OBR, coming out of 2025, precisely because of this orthodoxy. Is that good on the economy? In 2015, you had the Confederation of British Industry and a bunch of absolute chumps, I should say, saying, don't vote Labour, these dangerous left-wingers, vote Tory. Sensible, pragmatic austerity economics. Well, productivity stayed flat for 10 years. What's productivity? It means the amount of work people are doing per hour, the output isn't going up. That's not meant to happen, right? Because you have innovation, you have technological development, etc. That's simply not meant to happen. Something is short-circuited in the last 15 years with our economic model. So the idea that we're therefore going to say, who's going to continue administering economics as usual better? That is the wrong question to be asking. The question we should be asking is, who's going to deal with the housing crisis? Who's going to reduce inequality? Who's going to sort out public services? Who's going to deal with stagnant wages? Who's going to deal with climate change and demographic aging and an imminent elderly care crisis coming down the line in a decade or two? Those are the serious questions to be asking. So yes, Labour should take succor from the fact that these are really promising survey and polling data heading their way. But if we're actually interested fundamentally in the more important question of how do we solve these problems, they're less important than they look.